As someone born and bred in Chinese public education system, I spent a huge amount of time learning. Like studying from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. and doing shit ton of homework. But no one ever taught me how to learn. In fact, there's one word that can summarize all this happening in many Asian countries: meritocracy. Meritocracy is the notion of a political system in which economic goods or political power are vested in individual people based on ability and talent, rather than wealth or social class. To get ahead of other people in the system, what matters is your performance through exam or other demonstrated achievement. Growing up in China, I saw my peers grinding so hard for good grades, believing a degree is everything. Your connection with other people or building a community is not valued. What many parents value is that fierce but pointless competition, the idea of getting one score higher to get rid of hundreds of thousands of competitors above you, which has already caused a serious mental health issue among many teenagers. Okay, it's for sure a terrible way to learn, but have you thought about how to learn, especially in the time of AI? So if you're ready for this video, let's get into it. The insight of this video is from the book How We Learn by the author Benedict Carre. He covers some very interesting points in his book, like why forgetting something can be good for you, why ignorance has its own value, and some sort of distraction can have positive effects. I put a link to this book down below and we will talk about it later. But first, let's redefine learning. With student mindset, learning is probably like this. You wake up at 8 a.m. in the morning for the early lecture. You sit in the classroom and take notes. Then you head to the library. Spend extra hours walking through what you learned previously for preparing your exams. Well, no intention to deny this way of learning, but this is by no means the only way to learn. According to the author's theory, the science of learning is at bottom a study of mental muscle doing the work, the living brain, and how it manages streaming sights, sounds, and scenes of daily life. This process doesn't only happen when you sit in the classroom or library. No matter you are in a coffee shop, paging through a magazine so randomly, or you have a small talk with your colleagues in the office kitchen, your brain cells collide with each other to make a fire during this small event. As a form of networks, they ease into the hippocampus. Finally, they consolidate along the neocortex in the shifting array that preserve the basic plot points. So learning can also take many other forms. Having internal training from the company is learning. Working on a project is learning, and learning can also happen when you have a catch-up session with your manager for a quick work update. If you've gotten sick of sitting in the classroom, office, library, changing the location might be surprisingly good for creativity. It happened to me a couple of times that I spent hours in the library, but I still couldn't figure out the solution to a coding challenge. But one day, I was sitting in a coffee shop with my laptop. The light music was on, people were chatting nonstop, but my brain was quite relaxed somehow, and surprisingly, I found out the solution to the coding challenge. And it was actually not as complicated as expected. The author of this book introduces 4 steps of loop to explain why it can happen. They are preparation, incubation, illumination, and verification. First, preparation is like hours of mental wrestling for solving a specific problem to the point that all your ideas are exhausted, but you still fail to solve it. This stage is not useless. It helps you understand the problem, the background information, and the instructions at hand. Then, incubation. At this stage, you've got so tired of it, you decide to push aside this problem for your mental well-being purpose. You go for a walk, listen to music, or simply just grab a cup of coffee. Perhaps it's a crisp clinching of coffee bean in a container, or perhaps it's a stranger's random conversation you overheard. At these small moments, the previous information in your mind is associated with new information, and the elements of a problem are being assembled, taken apart, and reassembled. You are not aware of this process in your subconscious, but it's literally happening. That's why in the next stage called illumination, you suddenly have the aha moment in your brain. All that confuses you gets cleared. Eventually, at the last stage called verification, you review the solution and make sure it indeed works. You can ask ChatGPT how to improve the chance of getting into this incubation stage when you feel quite exhausted by a problem. It can be as simple as taking a deep breath, listening to music, or drinking coffee with your friends for micro resets. But to enter deeper incubation, it recommends you to go to the nature, go swimming, visit museum or gallery, etc. You also need to figure out what you are going to learn, because the strategy usually varies with different types of problems. Type 1 task is what most people are so familiar with because we all go through years of education. These are tasks that usually have clear rules and guidelines to follow and clear deadlines to chase. You can plan them beforehand. Like you must submit your team project before someday to a professor, prepare for the presentation and the final exam, and you must get at least 6 out of 100 to pass the course. So the solution to this type of learning is usually make organized plan. Perhaps you put tasks for each day on your to-do list. It's alright, but in reality, we usually need to learn many things whose roles are blurred, things which there are no absolute right and wrong, which you must spend a lot of time exploring the spectrum in middle, the blurred possibility. For example, I want to learn how to become a good YouTuber. This is purely out of my interest, not something, imposed upon me by school. There's no supervisor dictating me to get 10,000 subscribers in a month. I'm left alone with myself to figure out what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do this. And I feel YouTube algorithm is sometimes a bit weird. You might suddenly get 200k viewings for a random topic that you think is unlikely to appeal to your audience. But for some hot topic, you bet there will go viral, but it turns out people don't really care. My opinion, in this scenario, it's difficult to predict what's going to happen in the future, especially you're in the industry with an ever-changing landscape. Planning to hit milestone in clear timeline is like using your current ignorance to capture the uncertainty of the future. It's a bit pointless in my point of view. Based on my experience, the better way is to set boundaries about what not to do, what you are not willing to sacrifice, your borderline. For example, I may never know when I'm gonna hit 100,000 subscribers, but I will never talk about ideas that I don't subscribe to. I will never share something that I've never experienced before. It's about your no. This strategy might be better for you to face uncertain factors in the future. Like, if someone asked me if he or she should move to another city, I will probably say no if this action cannot bring a big transformation to your life. Like your salary won't get doubled. I use ChatGPT to show you an example of how AI can help you with this. Let me use the YouTube stuff. I ask ChatGPT to measure if my objective is suitable for making clear long-term plan. It warns me against any rigid year-long plan for many variables coming into play in my goal, and it suggests I don't commit to an aggressive daily upload schedule before I've built a repeatable product system and find topic audience fit. That means I probably need to calm down and observe who my audience will be. It also makes me week by week plan, which is small but more quantifiable, so I can test the water and adjust direction if I want to. I believe you've heard of top-down and bottom-up methods in learning. Top-down requires a big picture context, then deconstructed to understand the necessary components and how they fit together to achieve the goal. Bottom-up learning starts with fundamental components like facts, roles, vocabulary, syntax, and gradually build complexity and assemble them into larger structures and understanding. These tools are not mutually exclusive. We usually use both to learn a topic at the same time. For example, you already have a prerequisite knowledge in macro and microeconomics, and you want to research, let's say, financial market of Europe. I think top-down method usually works better. Of course, that's my personal opinion. So I'm going to draft a simple mind map to show which dimensions I want to research. I will probably talk about GDP growth among EU countries, interest rates over the past 10 years, monetary and fiscal policy, inflation rate and financial regulation, etc. Alternatively, I can ask a cursor to create this mind map for me. So it will be like, hi, imagine you're an expert in Europe economy and the financial market. I want to do research on the financial market of Europe. Help me plot a mind map about different dimensions of its economy and the financial market, like a GDP, monetary policy, interest rate, inflation rate, etc. Give me no fewer than 5 dimensions and expand each one. Plus, give me the link to references under each dimension, like websites, paper, article, news, blah blah blah, and save them as CSV file. As you can see, cursor automatically plotted this mind map with great length of detail. It has several nodes like macroeconomic indicators, fiscal and monetary policy, financial markets and institutions, structural and social factors. It also gave very detailed breakdown of each dimension, like it covers 3 essential elements under macroeconomic indicators: inflation, GDP, and unemployment rate. Cursor also gives links to these important statistics, which it automatically saved as Excel format. So with this top-down strategy, width comes first, then depth second. I really recommend this way of learning because it allows you to grasp a big picture or context, which is quite important in learning. Without some important background info, you might quickly lose your interest and question like, why does it matter? Why should I care to learn this? And how's it relevant to me? But at least for me, with background info, I usually feel stronger connection to projects. I know everyone's learning style is different, so you need to figure out when and how to use this top-down and bottom-up respectively. Like for me, I prefer to start with bottom-up learning when it comes to learning a new language. I will first of all grasp the alphabet, pronunciation rules, basic vocabulary, simple grammar rules, then build phrases, sentences, and basic conversation. I prefer to wait until I build it up to at least A2 or B1 level, then I switch to top-down learning. I will try my best to immerse myself in the native environment. It can be talking to native speakers, reading a book, or watching YouTube videos in the language. Next, focus on one thing at a time. I don't recommend you to juggle between many objectives. Lots of my friends from school, including myself, were once bothered by a shared problem. Back in high school, the only idea was to prepare 高考, which translates into college entrance exams in China. The amount of time we spent studying was literally out of your imagination. I remember in the last year of my high school, I went to classroom at 7 a.m. and I finished at 10 p.m. Oh my gosh, even until today, I have no clue how I coped with this. We also struggled to learn 6 to 7 subjects at the same time. So if you think about it, the amount of time given to each subject was actually not so much. And it turned out everyone was like, my learning hour is so long, but the grade of each subject is just meh. We were like, hamsters running relentlessly on the wheel without any way out, only focusing on how to play the game well, instead of reflecting upon the flaws or weaknesses the game itself has. I was not aware of it until I learned opportunity cost from economic class. You spend lots of time in chemistry at the expense of physics, which becomes your opportunity cost because resources are scarce. That's why I want to mention Simon learning methods. This is a learning technique invented by a Nobel laureate in economics called Herbert Alexander Simon. He claimed that for a person with certain foundation, as long as he really works hard, he can master any knowledge within 6 months. Not here to discuss how he came to the conclusion of the 6 months. Also, it doesn't have to be 6 months, but a consecutive chunk of undisrupted time. I'm at least inspired by his theory to set my priorities straight and only cope with one problem at a time. If I were given the chance to learn data science once again, I would not touch many topics at the same time. Like studying machine learning and basic Python knowledge together is probably not a good idea. Perhaps I would ask ChatGPT to make a reasonable data science roadmap. So on a monthly basis, I travel from basic Python foundations to SQL database to statistics to machine learning foundation to deep learning, blah, blah, blah. Finally, to building personal portfolio. So at each stage, I can fully focus on one dimension. One thing I really like about AI is that AI provides a feedback system, which is very essential to me if I want to make sure I truly grasp a new concept. Someone says the best way to learn a concept is to teach people, but I also believe that the best way to learn is to teach AI or perhaps be tested by AI. Self-study is a good thing, but it sometimes blinds me. Back in school, I usually thought I understood everything during the library sessions, but it turned out the exam results were usually not as good as expected. I realized that was partly because there was no one sitting next to me to check if I truly understood everything. In other words, the feedback system was missing. Here is how AI can help you. For example, before I prepared the job interview for the quantitative analyst role, I asked ChatGPT to tell me what dimensions I need to prepare, like machine learning, statistics, finance, coding. Then ChatGPT recommended me some websites that have top 10 most popular interview questions. I prepared each chunk of questions for a while before asking ChatGPT to test my knowledge. You can also ask it to score your answers and the feedback about what to improve. I really like using the voice functions to answer those questions because it makes it more like a real job interview. Okay, here's the thing. All I said before doesn't make any sense to you if you don't have a good study environment. It has happened to me so many times when I try to focus on work or study, but suddenly notifications from the phone grabbed my attention, so I started to reply to messages, but it somehow became endless. I was like, if I already checked the messages, why shouldn't I bother to watch some Instagram reels or maybe listen to music was also fun. Then it turned out 1 hour was gone, but I still didn't do anything. So if you have the same experience, turn off the notification or just put your phone away to somewhere invisible. Or you may as well reach out to Grok, which might make you feel guilty of your procrastination. You know, I just noticed recently I procrastinated too much, which is such a waste of time. Please say something as brutal as possible to make me feel guilty, please.
192 modules? That's a colossal time suck you've dumped on yourself. Pure self-sabotage. You could have knocked out something actually worthwhile instead of drowning in that pointless pile of busy work. Shame on you for wasting all that energy.
Great, but it might not be good for your mental health. Last point before the end of this video, it's totally okay to slow down. Growing up in a highly competitive education environment, I've had this enough. I used to be so freaked out of being a lagger, and because of this mentality, I feel kind of depressed from 18 to early 20s. I got burned out at some point and went through a long time mental adjustment. In retrospect, I gradually learned that life is not about hitting many milestones and getting a decent diploma. And slowing down is actually very healthy for everyone to grow in the long term. Like, life is a marathon, so you should also make it easy in terms of learning. So that's all for today. Let's see you next time. Bye.